Good evening, everybody. I'm Mrs. Sweeney. I'm one of the newest members of the administrative team here at East Senior. Thanks for coming out on such a dreary, kind of miserable night. We hope that tonight you'll leave with some valuable information. We'll answer some questions for you and maybe a little peace of mind. I know planning for higher education can be financially scary. My husband and I were there a few years ago ourselves. So I also want to just take a second to thank our counselors and our student services team. Ms. Claire is here tonight, Mrs. Smilinich, and Mrs. Kavari. They work so hard for your kids. They're such deeply committed professionals. They really care about them. They not only help them try and figure out, where they want to go and what they want to do, but the best way to get there. So I really enjoy working with them. Ms. Claire, thanks.
Hello, welcome everybody. I hope you all have got a packet when you walked in. If not, there's a lot of extras over there on the table. The date is wrong. I know you guys all heard that we had to switch the date, so don't mind that. We're going to talk today about, I'm going to talk about scholarship information, and then we have a presenter from UB, Kevin Ryan, who I'm going to introduce afterwards, to discuss the FAFSA and the financial aid information to help you along with that process. I know it can be a scary one, so hopefully you'll find this to be helpful. Okay, as far as scholarships are concerned, there are a few different ways and a few different types of scholarships. We have local scholarships. Such things as, our local parent-teacher group has a scholarship, our Teachers Association has a scholarship, different community members within West Seneca all create their own local scholarship. So that's one type of a scholarship that your kids can earn. There's merit-based scholarships, which are scholarships, if a student does really well academically and has high grades, they may meet those standards to get a merit-based scholarship either through a college or through the state does have merit-based scholarships as well. Special needs and talents. There's a lot of scholarships out there for students, especially who are involved in community service. So that's a real big one. And then also athletic scholarships. Okay, where to find the information? Library Media Center, so obviously that's always a good spot to do some research. We have information in our Library Media Center and also any of the other local libraries. Places of worship and local unions may have some scholarship opportunities. Your employers may have some opportunities as well. Colleges and universities, almost all have specific scholarships to their own school. So that's something definitely to look into. If you know your child wants to go to a specific college, you can look up and see what different types of opportunities that specific school has. Student services, I'm going to go through all of that, but we in our office have scholarship opportunities, and then there's going to be a whole bunch of web links in your packet and in the presentation. Probably the most popular one is fastweb.com. So there's lots of different search engines that you can go to online also for opportunities. Student services. We have, I don't know if you guys have already been receiving the scholarship newsletters that our office puts together. So student services on both sides of town does have a newsletter, and I would say every 3 to 4 weeks or so we put a new newsletter out with any scholarship opportunities that we're aware of. So on the newsletter it'll say, what the name of the scholarship is, who's eligible, what you need to do, what the deadline is. So all the basic information's on there. Many of those scholarships you do right online. Some of them we have paper applications down in student services that your kids can pick up. This newsletter is available, we have paper copies in student services. We always have it on our webpage for both sides of town. And you can sign up, if you haven't already done so, you can stop into student services and you can sign up to have the newsletters emailed to you as well. We also gave out in October, each senior received a scholarship book. And this is something that we created that has about 30 to 40 local scholarships right in this book. We give it to each senior. They all pick one up and sign for it. And all of those are due March 30th, so the kids have, you know, long stretch of time to go through those books and figure out which scholarships they would be able to apply for. And, you know, of course, the more you apply for, the better the chances are of winning. So certainly we encourage everybody to do that. Okay, here we go. Internet resources, like I stated earlier in the presentation, there's lots of different websites. Our website has lots of things that you can find. FastWeb, like I said, is one of the biggest ones. BigFuture.org is good not only for scholarship information, but they have financial aid information, they have college research information, you know, career information if you're, you know, if your kids aren't sure what type of a career they want to go into. So I would say that those ones are probably the, you know, the biggest suggestions. When you're looking at a scholarship, you know, of course, the first thing you want to look at is eligibility. So the scholarships will say specifically what they are looking for in a person to recommend for a particular scholarship. So, you know, if it's, you know, an athletic scholarship, it'll say what type of sport, you know, what they need to have athletically. If it's merit, it'll tell you what type of a grade or an SAT score. So they'll give you specifics on what to look for. Create an inventory. So basically you want to keep track of all your scholarships. Keep track of what you're applying for and how much they're all, you know, worth, potentially how much you could earn. Strive for reusability. What this means is, you know, have one solid scholarship essay and make it one that you can reuse in different applications. Okay, so, you know, there's no sense to have to spend that extra time to do different essays for every single application. So just make sure that you're, you know, you have one really good essay that you can kind of, you know, use over and over and over again. Neatness counts. Some of the scholarships are going to be pen and paper. So if those are pen and paper, obviously use blue or black ink. You know, write very carefully and neatly. If you can scan and type, you know, type it out, that's always preferable. Keep copies of everything. Okay, so always make a copy for yourself before you send anything out, and check deadline dates. That's a big thing. On our newsletter and for our book, we don't create those deadlines. So a lot of times kids will come down with a scholarship and say, it's a day late, you know, can you help me? I don't make the deadlines. So, you know, if they miss a deadline, there's absolutely nothing that we can do. So you just got to make sure that they, you know, they pay attention to that. Okay. Scam warnings. There are a lot of different scams that you will find potentially while you're going through the scholarship search. You should never have to pay a fee to apply for a scholarship. If they say, you know, give me $10 and you can win, you know, $500, no, that I would run screaming. That is never something that you should do. Okay, there's not fees for scholarship applications. They shouldn't ask for credit card or bank information either. Okay, guaranteed. No scholarships are guaranteed. Okay, so if it says, you know, you fill this out and give me $10, you're guaranteed to win. That's another flag, a red flag that that's not, you know, legitimate. No work involved. Scholarships are gonna have an application, sometimes an essay, sometimes recommendations. So if it seems too good to be true, chances are it probably is. Sometimes we come across scholarships and there's no contact information. So there's nobody to call or email, or there's no web page, or, you know, that's normally a sign that something sketchy is going on. And pressure tactics. So somebody's, you know, trying to really pressure you into a scholarship. Again, you would wanna steer clear from that. On the flip side of all this hard work is we do have a scholarship community awards night, and that's something that's done on both sides of town, and that's to reward students who put in the time and the effort and won a local scholarship from our community scholarship book that we handed out. And that's a really nice event that you know, we really enjoy throwing for the kids and the families. West Senior is going to have theirs on June 9th at 6:30, and East Senior is going to be June 18th at 6:30. So those are our way to reward everybody for all their efforts. All right, now that we got that squared away, I just wanted to introduce Kevin Ryan, who is from the Financial Aid Office at the University of Buffalo, who volunteered his time to come and help us out and talk to you guys about financial aid. So I'd like to give him a nice warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, so bear with me with the technology tonight. What we're going to be talking about tonight is financial aid. and what you need to do to apply for financial aid. What are some of the programs that are out there? How you access these programs. So the topics we're going to talk about is financial aid, the cost of attendance, which is this budget that each of the schools put together for students to attend their schools. We're also going to talk about the expected family contribution, which is that number that's derived when you fill out that federal application, which is called the FAFSA, okay? We're going to talk about different categories and types and sources of financial aid. We're going to talk about the FAFSA itself and what you need to do and when you need to do it. We're going to talk about the verification process. Sometimes we have to verify the information that's on your FAFSA. The school itself has to verify it. And then we need to talk about special circumstances. Those are things that happen in your home. Unemployment, death, disability, things like that. So we'll talk about all of those. So what is financial aid? Well, the government looks at it as funding that's given to students to attend college, okay? And basically what they do is they ask you to fill out the FAFSA. So in order to receive any federal monies, you need to fill out what's called the FAFSA. Now, if your children are thinking about attending private schools, especially, they may ask that you fill out a separate application for that institution. So the one thing I would always ask you to do is, the FAFSA is the #1 application, but always check with the schools that you may be attending to see if they want you to fill out a separate financial aid information, or financial aid application, okay? And we're going to talk about the cost of attendance and the formula here in a minute. Hey, button's working. Okay, the cost of attendance. So the cost of attendance is also called the budget. So the budget is something that we put together for every single student that goes to college. So when they fill out the FAFSA, they indicate to us if they're going to be living on campus, off campus, or they're going to commute with their parent, or from their parents' home. So what we do is we take that information and we put together a budget. Well, the budget, the cost of attendance, same thing, it's made up of two different components. There's the direct costs. The direct costs are really anything that the college or university can charge you for. So, for an example, if you're living on campus, we could charge you for tuition fees, room and board. But if you're commuting, we're only really going to charge you for tuition and fees. So you can see the direct costs vary depending on what you indicate on the FAFSA. We also need to include your indirect costs. Once you go to college, the books aren't provided to you, so we have to put in a budget component for books and supplies. We don't bill you from the university for those, but we do need to put that in the budget, in the cost of attendance. Also transportation, getting to and from school, personal expenses, things like that. We take those two components, the direct costs and the indirect costs, and we come up with this budget. And that budget is going to vary from college to college. So if you're going to a more expensive college, that cost of attendance, chances are, is going to be higher. If you're going to, say, like a community college or even a public institution, the cost of attendance might be lower. Doesn't mean that it's going to be cheaper in the long run. It's just that that's what the budget is based on what their costs are. Okay? Okay, so those are all the components, as I mentioned before, that make up the cost of attendance. Okay? Depending on what you indicate on the FAFSA is the budget that we're going to give you and how we're going to package you for financial aid. Okay, the expected family contribution. So you fill out the FAFSA, and they take all that data that's on the FAFSA. And on the FAFSA, they're asking for both parental information and student information. Now, the #1 question I get is, well, my child is going to be 18 years old. I'm not providing any support. They're going to be living on their own. They should be considered independent. Most undergraduate students that are under the age of 24 are automatically considered dependent until they're 24 years of age. Whether you claim them on your taxes or not, okay, they are considered a dependent student. So which means that the parental information does need to be included on that FAFSA. There are a few circumstances, but you would need to talk to a financial aid advisor as to when that information isn't included, if a parent is incarcerated or something like that, okay? So they take all that information, the expected family contribution from both the data from the student and the data from the parent, and they come up with this number. And this number is what their students and parents are supposed to utilize to provide towards that student's education per year, which us in the financial aid field know that is not a realistic number in most cases. Okay? So, the formula that we use, we take that cost of attendance, that budget, we subtract off that expected family contribution, and that financial need is what schools use to package, what schools use to put together a financial aid award letter, okay? And that's how we let you know whether you're eligible for federal grants, whether you're eligible for certain interest-free federal loans, or a combination of all of those, okay? That's what we do. So, there's different categories of financial aid. There's need-based and non-need-based, okay? Need-based aid, when you're filing the FAFSA, that's need-based. The FAFSA is really meant for students with need. Well, how do you know if you have need? You have to fill out the FAFSA. So don't automatically assume because you talk to someone that you're not eligible for aid. You need to fill out that FAFSA yourself. The other question I get is, well, if I make X amount of dollars, I'm not going to qualify. The very worst scenario is, if you made $1 million last year and you filled out a FAFSA, you'd still qualify for what's called an unsubsidized loan. A student would still qualify for an unsubsidized loan. It's the worst scenario. So don't disregard filling out the FAFSA. I would always encourage you to fill out the FAFSA. The other thing we're going to talk about, and I'm going to mention time and time again through this presentation, is the FAFSA should be filled out every single year. You can't fill out the FAFSA for seniors in here until after January 1st. You always need to make sure that you check with the schools that you're applying to, whether you've been accepted or not, to find out what their FAFSA priority filing date is. For example, ours at UB is March 1st. So any students that file their FAFSA by March 1st will be considered for certain aid programs that students who filed after March 1st will not be, okay? Canisius College may be February 15th. Buff State may be February 1st. So you need to check. And what I would say is the schools that you're applying to, file the FAFSA by the earliest date possible. And the only other thing I'm going to mention about the FAFSA at this point is just because your taxes are done doesn't mean you can't file your taxes or your FAFSA early. Let me say that again. Just because your taxes aren't done, you could use estimates on your FAFSA. So don't let you filing your tax return dictate you filing your FAFSA early or late. You could always file it early because you could always use estimated amounts on the FAFSA, so don't hesitate. Okay, so we talked about need-based aid. How do you get need-based aid? Fill out the FAFSA, okay? So that's the most important thing. Non-need-based aid. Well, a lot of that has to do with scholarships and grants that have to do with athletics, academic, things like that. Types of financial aid. We have scholarships, grants, loans, and employment. Now, when we're looking at the scholarships and grants, those are what you want to focus on because that's the free money. That's the money you don't have to pay back. So as it was mentioned by Ms. Blair, that you need to do the legwork and go out and grab some of those scholarships. The grants I'll tell you about in a minute. You need to go out and look for scholarships. You need to ask around. If you know anybody that has a student in school and is receiving a scholarship, ask, how did they get that scholarship? I use this example every single time, but I had a student that came into my office that told me she received a $1,500 scholarship from a can of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was offering a scholarship. She was drinking a can of Diet Coke. She looked at it and said, hey, apply for a scholarship. She did, and she got $1,500. Students that work part-time at Tops and Wegmans, I believe they could qualify for up to $1,500 a year in a scholarship. Tops Wegmans isn't going to just say, oh, here's a scholarship because you work here. You have to ask for it sometimes. So you need to go out and do the legwork. Make sure. Nowadays, it's so much easier because you have websites like fastweb.com. Everything's at your fingertips now. You don't have to go through these big Peterson's guide that used to be about this thick, and nowadays I couldn't even see that. So you just, go out there and look and ask. And your employers, if you're a union member, usually a lot of unions have scholarships that are available. Okay, enough of my spiel about scholarships. Grants. Well, how do you qualify for grants? The FAFSA. That's how we determine what you qualify for in grants and how much you qualify for, and if you qualify for any grants. Okay, we're going to go over the different programs that are out there, but the largest program that's offered by the federal government is the Pell Grant. Okay, and that's almost $6,000 per year if you qualify for the maximum amount. New York State, because you're a New York State resident, and if you're attending a New York State school, you could receive a TAP grant, and that's over $5,300 a year. Okay, so those two grants in itself, you're talking over $11,000 if you receive both of those. Okay? Loans. Yes, the dreaded loans. Don't be afraid of them. Borrow them wisely. The reality is that most students do have to borrow student loans to attend school. Yes, there are students out there that do not, but it's not a bad thing. Look at it as an investment towards the future. But the reality is students need to know what they're borrowing, what the terms of those loans are. There's different kinds of loans that are offered to students out there from the federal government. The government does limit how much a student can take out per year. And we're going to go over those limits in a minute. But there's loans that are interest-free, and then there are loans that accrue interest. The interest-free loans are called subsidized loans. Those are subsidized by the government. There's another subsidized loan that's out there called the Perkins loan. And then there's an unsubsidized loan. That's the loan that's accruing interest while students are in school. And yes, there is a loan offered by the federal government for the parents to take out, and that's called a Parent Plus loan. The thing that we always mention to students is just because we offer you a loan, if you don't need that loan, don't take it out, because a loan you have to pay back. Years ago, I think you heard horror stories about students coming out of college saying, oh my God, I didn't know I even borrowed this. Well, yeah, there were some unscrupulous financial aid people out there and some unscrupulous schools out there. Not nowadays. When you take out a loan, they make you go through everything. They make you go through what's called an entrance counseling. They make you sign an MPN. You know that you're taking out a loan, okay? But you have to just be responsible. Okay? With federal loans, repayment usually doesn't begin until after the students graduate. So they don't expect a student to pay a loan back if they're still attending school. Okay? And that includes if they go on to graduate work or professional school. Okay, so these are the limits. So you see that it's not unlimited. The government limits the amount that a student can borrow per academic year. So for an incoming student, a freshman, they could borrow up to $5,500. Okay? Sophomore, $6,500. Junior and senior, $7,500. And that could be a combination of subsidized, unsubsidized loans. It would be a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Okay? Once again, how do you know which ones you qualify for? When you file the FAFSA, when the financial aid offices start putting together award letters, we'll let you know what you qualify for on that award letter, whether it's subsidized, unsubsidized, and all that. Okay? Employment. Okay, so federal work study. There's work study and then there's non-work study. Federal work study is one of those programs. Remember I mentioned a little while ago about filing your FAFSA by the priority filing date for the school? Well, for example, at UB, if a student qualified for work study and they filed their FAFSA after March 2nd, they're not getting work study. okay? Because that's one of those programs that they have to file by March 1st for. It's called a campus-based program. So it's important that you meet that priority filing date at the school. About working. There's federal work study. That's a need-based program. Once again, the school will determine on the financial aid award letter whether you qualify for that or not. Even if a student doesn't qualify for work study, they could still work while they're on campus. Most colleges, usually through their career services office, offer on-campus jobs. To me, I always say I encourage students to work while they're in school, at least a little bit. First of all, it gives them pocket money, teaches them responsibility, and in a lot of cases, it could build up their resume, especially if they're working in a department where they're going to end up graduating with a degree from. Okay? It's great experience. So don't discourage them from working. If they can get work study, that's great. If they can't, there's other jobs that are available. But working and being employed during school, you know, the reality is that's the real world. You have to learn how to balance your studies and work. Okay? Sources of financial aid, the federal government, as I mentioned, FAFSA, that's how you tap into that. State aid, as I mentioned earlier, TAP, that's the largest scholarship program that state offers within the country. And then private organizations, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the private civic churches because we had gone over that already. The federal government, yes, the largest source of financial aid. FAFSA.gov is the website that you utilize to fill out the FAFSA. I also have in here FAFSA.ed.gov, I think, but it's same website. FAFSA.ed.gov, FAFSA.gov, same website you utilize to fill out your FAFSA every single year, remember. Other thing I want to mention is FAFSA.com. Do not go to that website because FAFSA.com is a website that will ask you for your credit card information. They'll charge you for what's a free application. So if you go to a FAFSA website and someone's asking you for your credit or debit card, get out of it. You're on the wrong website. Go to FAFSA.gov or FAFSA.ed.gov. That is the website that you would want to utilize to fill out your FAFSA every single year. So these are the programs that are offered. I mentioned the Pell Grant program, okay? Close to $6,000. This year it's $5,730. It's going up a little next year. Supplemental Educational Opportunity Program. It's called SEOG. That's another one of those campus-based programs. Remember I told you, if you don't file by March 1st at UB, even if you qualify for that program, we won't give it to you, okay? Once again, it's important that you file by the priority filing date. Perkins Loan, another campus-based program. Perkins Loan is just like a subsidized loan. No interest is accruing on it while you're in school. Interest doesn't start accruing on it till 9 months after you graduate from school, and then the interest rate's at 5%. Okay? Federal work study, we talked about that. Yes, sir.
When you say you're in school, this doesn't count for, say, somebody who changes their major halfway through and now they have to take another 2 years or something like that.
Yes, it does.
Really?
So if you change your major, yeah, the rule of thumb with paying back your loans is that as long as you're registered at least 6 credit hours and you're matriculated towards a degree, which means you're working towards a degree, your loans are automatically deferred.
Okay.
So even a student going part-time, full-time, just so you know, is usually considered 12 credit hours or more. Even if they're going part-time, which is 6 credit hours or more, their loans are still considered deferred. Okay? Federal Stafford loans, those are the subsidized and the unsubsidized loans. Okay? When I mentioned about the subsidized loans earlier, I mentioned about the Perkins loans. Yeah, they give you a 9-month grace period after you graduate or after you leave school. Subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans, they give you a 6-month grace period. So they don't expect you the day after graduation, give me my money back. No, they're going to give you a little time to organize yourself, hopefully get a job, and then start paying these loans back. The one thing I always tell students is when you start paying loans back, and I work with a lot of professional students that have debt loads of $200,000, $300,000. Focus on paying these things back sooner than later, because the government will give you, in some cases, up to 30 years to pay these loans back. That's a mortgage, my God. And you know you're going to be paying interest that whole time. So if you do take out a loan, once again, be responsible and try to get that thing taken care of once you're done with school. Just something to think about in the future. Then we have Federal Plus loans. As I mentioned earlier, those are the loans that are offered to parents for the student to utilize to pay for their education and to use for their expenses while they're in school. Okay? State aid. I also mentioned earlier that because we're New York State residents, I think we all are here, and as long as you're going to New York State school, you can't take it to Florida, you can't take it to California with you, you could apply for the TAP grant. Okay, that's the largest grant out there. Now, there is a separate application for TAP. So I mentioned the most important application is the FAFSA. I mentioned that you should check with your schools to make sure that there isn't an institutional financial aid application that you need to fill out. You also need to fill out a TAP application. Well, how do you do it? When you fill out the FAFSA, it's all done electronically. Everything's online now. When you get to the very end of the FAFSA, there's going to be, you go to submit it, and it'll say, for New York State residents only, you could link yourself right to the TAP application. It's all going to be pre-populated. It's going to have all the information from your FAFSA that they need on the TAP application. You just have to check it over and submit it. If for some reason you missed that link, you could always go to that website, hesc.newyork.gov, and fill it out. Okay? So the nice thing about it is, you know, you could link it from your FAFSA. But the other thing is, you have to remember, every year, you have to file the FAFSA, you have to file the TAP application, and you would need to check with your school to see if you need to fill out their institutional application every year, if they require one. Okay? Private sources, once again, keep your eyes and ears open. It's so important that you do that. Even like I didn't mention earlier, like newspapers like the Bee. I think you have a West Seneca Bee, right? Okay, they have scholarship opportunities there. Church groups, just ask people. It can't hurt to ask. If it's, I don't know, then move on to the next person. Okay, and look on the internet. But as that was mentioned earlier, beware of scams. If someone's inviting you to the Holiday Inn for this great reception, someone's trying making money off you. They're going to try to make money off you. If anybody's asking you for anything other than return postage, which isn't even nowadays, I think everything's done electronically, that would be the only thing I'd ever pay for a scholarship is return postage. I don't care if it's $5. They shouldn't. You're supposed to be getting money from them. You're not supposed to be providing them money. Okay? Fastweb.com, great scholarship search website, but beware of scholarship scams that are out there. They can't filter them all out. Okay, the FAFSA. So it is an online application. Yes, there are paper applications out there, but I do not recommend that you use a paper application. When you fill out the FAFSA now electronically, within hours, they have it already processed for you, okay? I mean, when you do it by paper, you're waiting like 4 to 8 weeks, if it doesn't get lost. So you just want to make sure you do it electronically. It does come in both English and Spanish now. Okay, so how do you start the process? The question I have is, how many seniors do we have? Rest juniors, are we looking at? Juniors and sophomores? Okay, so how do you get the ball rolling with getting the FAFSA filed? Remember I mentioned that students that are 24 years of age or younger are really considered dependent students. So, in order to do the FAFSA electronically, both the student and one of the parents need to get what's called a PIN number. And the PIN number is going to be your electronic signature. It's how you sign that FAFSA electronically. So, for seniors, you definitely want to go out there. You can go out there tonight and get this PIN number. Okay, it's just a 4-digit PIN number for both the student and the parent. I think they're going to ask your last name, social security number, date of birth. And then they'll email it to you. Okay? Juniors, you could do that too. Just put it aside, don't lose it, because you're going to need it next year. Okay, so the PIN number is really how you get things started as far as filing the FAFSA. You're going to need that PIN number to go look at certain things, and I'll get into that in a minute, okay? So it's important.
Is it going to be the same PIN number for a second child?
So, if you have 2 children in college, the parent could use the same PIN number. The other child needs to get a new PIN number. Make sense? Okay? The parent can use the same PIN number.
And the same PIN number all 4 years?
Oh yeah, that PIN number, as long as you don't lose it or forget it, you could use that because that is your identity when you go onto the FAFSA website. So the FAFSA, I mentioned all this earlier, it's just collecting demographic information and financial information from both the parent and the student. It's a very user-friendly form, especially now that it's electronic, because what it does is it takes you through a few questions at a time, where before, you used to see this stack of 8 pages and you're like, oh my God, this is like filling out my tax return. Not anymore. And it'll even prompt you to do certain things if they think you made a mistake in that. So I think you're going to find that filling it out, if you haven't filled any of it out before, it's pretty user-friendly after the first time. So that's the standard form. Okay, now you could file it anytime during the academic year, but I've already told you numerous times, you could start filling it out January 1st every year, and you want to file it by the earliest priority filing date to the colleges or universities you're applying to.
Is there any advantage to filing it Jan 1 as opposed to before the deadline?
I would say probably not. Okay, yeah, is there any advantage of filing it right on January 1st? Unless some school is asking for you to file it on January 1st or by January 2nd, I don't know if there's it's really the priority filing date they're looking at to determine if you're going to receive campus-based programs or even institutional programs based on financial need.
It's not first come, first served.
Only if you don't miss the priority filing date, okay? So, here we go again about the priority filing date, right at the very end of that slide. FAFSA on the web, once again, remember I told you I put FAFSA.gov, FAFSA.ed.gov, same website, okay? Just don't utilize FAFSA.com. I think it's $79 they're charging. Someone's making money. Yeah, and it's amazing how many people utilize it, amazing. Why the government never got that website is beyond me, but like I said, the FAFSA is available after January 1st. It's amazing. I had someone that actually went in at 12:01 on New Year's Eve and filed it, and they said it was there. I'm like, wow, the government's never usually on top of things like that. So it is available, 12:01. Now, someone's in here is going to prove me wrong, but there's a worksheet that's out there right now that you could actually utilize to start gathering your information. In fact, in your packet, you have a copy of the worksheet. So you have a paper version of it. So on that, in that worksheet, you could start gathering certain things. Yeah, I know you can't gather your financial, your income information, but there's certain other things you could gather. They're going to ask for asset information. If you have money in a savings account, stocks, bonds, you could start gathering your thoughts as to what you need to put on there right after January 1st, or what information you need to gather. The question I always get is, do I have to put my 401k on here? You do not have to put your 401k, okay? You will have to put the money that you contributed. If it was an employer-based 401k, you will have to put the amount you contributed last year on here, but that's it. So if you got $1 million in a 401k, I want to know who, but you do not have to put that on there. Another thing is, you do not have to put the value of your home on the FAFSA, okay? So if you have your house, own your house free and clear, and you have, equity in it, we don't ask for that. The FAFSA does not ask for that. I will tell you, some of the institutional financial aid applications may, okay? They may want to look at that. FAFSA will never ask you for that information, okay? So, utilize the worksheet, especially now if you want to start gathering some information for us seniors in the room. What's the information that's going to be required? Well, remember, I told you that you could always use estimates on the FAFSA. So if you don't have your tax return filed by the earliest priority filing date that's required of one of the schools you're applying to, it doesn't matter. You could use estimates, and you can indicate on the FAFSA, I will file my tax return, okay? So you're gonna need federal and state income tax if you have them, W-2s. I think by law, the government has to, or the employers have to send out W-2s by the end of January, so you should have them, sir.
Are we talking it says here previous year?
Previous year. It's always based on the prior year. So this year, what you're going to be filing the FAFSA for 2015, 2016, it's going to be based on 2014's income. Yes, correct. Thank you. So it is based. Another thing that you could start gathering, if you're receiving child support, if you have any tax-deferred pension payments or things like that, savings plans, you could start gathering that information, because that's the information that we do need to have recorded on the FAFSA. Bank account balances, stocks, bonds. If you own a rental property and you don't live in that rental property, so if I own a double, I don't have to report my double as an asset because I live in that double. I don't have to report the income. The only place I'm reporting that income is on my tax return. But if I owned a double that I didn't live in, I would have to report what the net worth of that property is on my FAFSA, okay? How do you determine what net worth is? Well, if the house is worth $100,000 and you owe $98,000, the net worth is $2,000 on that house, okay? Simple as that. And it's an estimate. Trust me, we're not going to be like, oh my God, you're off by $10. We're not going to be that tough on you. So put whatever you think it is. You could list up to 10 schools on the FAFSA. So at this point of the game, you don't know where you're going to go. Most students don't know where they're going to go, where they're going to be accepted. So you could list up to 10 schools. Remember what I said earlier. You do not have to be accepted into the school to list the school on the FAFSA. Okay, so don't wait till you get accepted to that school. List them on the FAFSA. If you don't get accepted, trust me, the school's just going to ignore your information anyways if it's sent to them, the FAFSA information. Any questions on that? Okay, so as far as IRS retrieval tool.
I have one question.
Yes, oh, I'm sorry.
Do you fill out a FAFSA for each student in college?
Correct. Yes, so you have to fill out, if you have 2 children in college,
Yes.
each student needs to have a FAFSA on file. Yes. And it should be somewhat easier for you because you know what your information is going to be. The only thing that will be different is the student's information. And another thing I'm going to mention to you too is when you're filling out the FAFSA, because I do know that most parents do fill out the FAFSA, if you can, try to have the student with you when you're filling it out. They should be aware of what's going on in that FAFSA, but make sure you put their information in the demographic information, not yours. It's one of the biggest mistakes that parents will start listing their name, their social security number, their date of birth, and that causes some issues. You have to start all over. You have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, annuities aren't considered income either?
Annuities, if you're tapping into the annuity, whatever the annuity that you received would be on your tax return anyway. So you don't have to put what the balance of the annuity is now. You just have to put whatever income you received, which will be already reported on your income tax return from annuities. Okay? So IRS retrieval. So if you do have your FAFSA, if you do have your taxes done, and this I think is after February, by mid-February. So if you wait, you don't need to fill out your FAFSA till March 1st, and you do it February 28th. That's okay as long as the schools, it's not, too late. And you could use, and you have your taxes done, you could use a tool what's called the IRS retrieval. So the biggest complaint that parents and students have is like, oh my God, I have to get all my tax information. Well, this way, if you agree to it, they will grab the information right from the IRS as long as you filed your tax return. So it makes things a lot easier on you where you don't have to do all that financial information. Yes, you still have to put what the balances are for your assets like stocks, bonds, rental property, things like that. But all your income information, you don't have to bother putting on there. Because if you utilize the IRS retrieval, that can happen automatically. I will let you know that I have a feeling this is going to be happening in the future. Now you volunteer to do it. I have a feeling the government's going to do this automatically in the future. So I think they're just testing the waters right now. We've been doing it for a couple years, and it's really been a huge success. A lot of people are utilizing it. So just be prepared that they may end up utilizing this down the road. The other question I get is, well, what if I used an estimate on my FAFSA? Do I have to update it once I do file my taxes? Well, yes. You could go in and say, use the IRS retrieval. Or you could just update the information yourself. So if you do use an estimate on your FAFSA, you do need to go back and update it to what the correct information is. Okay?
Is this solely based on a family's financial situation, or where does your GPA and your SAT scores come in?
That's going to come in for scholarship. This is only, FAFSA is financial need, remember? And then that's going to be based on merit-based. Okay? And merit-based scholarships and merit-based awards are usually determined by each of the admissions offices. Okay? So the schools themselves determine that. Federal government does not award aid based on merit. Okay? FAFSA results. So you filled out the FAFSA. We talked about the EFC. They come up with that great magical number. And then you list the 10 schools, maybe 5, whatever. We get that information. Then it's up to us to determine what your financial aid package is going to be. Most schools start packaging their students for financial aid. Nowadays, by mid-February, you start getting these award letters. Depending on the school, you either get a paper version or you'll get an electronic version. So you have to be on the lookout. Another thing you have to have are the lines of communication open between you and the student, because they're going to email it to the student. You got to remember, the parent's taken out of that equation when it comes to college. Bills go to the student, financial aid package goes to the student. Yeah, we know that parents are the ones who are paying for it most of the time. But the reality is you need to make sure that they're letting you know when they're receiving communications. Because years ago, you could intercept it in the mailbox. Now when it's done through electronically, you can't intercept it as easily. Okay, so it's important that you let them know.
If you're divorced, do you have to get both incomes?
No, if you're, and that's a great question. If you're divorced, okay, whoever the student resides with, 51%, whoever the custodial parent is, okay, you make that determination. Okay, we're not going to determine any of that, the financial aid offices. And that's the parent that needs to be listed on the FAFSA. The other parent's information does not need to be listed on there unless there's child support that's being paid, and you'll have to report that. Okay? It doesn't matter who claims. It's who the student resides with, which is usually the custodial parents, 51% of the time. Now, the next question that comes into play is, my parents are divorced. I live with mom. I'm going to college. Mom got married. I have to put mom's information and stepdad's information on the FAFSA. Okay? I don't put my biological father's information on the FAFSA. I put my mom and my stepdad's. Okay? So that's how that works.
I have a quick question
Sure.
also. As far as the custodial parent, is it okay if, because when they fill out the forms, you need one parent and one child.
Correct.
Can the non-custodial parent help fill out the form, or does it have to be the custodial parent?
The non-custodial parent could definitely help fill out the form, but it should be only the custodial parent's data needs to be on that form. Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it doesn't matter who claims the child on the tax.
It does not matter who claims. And you'll see that in a lot of, this goes back and forth. Like I'll have parents, they'll say, well, one year I get them, the next year, my ex-wife gets them. It doesn't matter. That has no bearing on it. It's the custodial parent that is listed on the FAFSA.
So providing the transcript of the tax return is not required with the FAFSA form?
It is not, but we're going to get into that in a minute under the verification, okay?
How about if
If money was received from an estate and it depends on whose name it's in, if it's sitting in a savings account, if it's sitting in a checking account, if it's sitting in an account, they have to list it as an asset on there. Whatever money, you won the lottery, $50,000, I threw it in my savings account, it needs to be listed. The one thing I will mention to you is an asset is always better in the parent's name than it is the student's name, because they will count towards that EFC, they will count a higher contribution towards that expected family contribution, a higher percentage, I should say, when it's the student. So, I'm not saying everyone go move everything over to the parent's name, but an asset is better always in the parent's name than the student's name. The question always is brought up about 529 plans. Okay, a lot of people have taken out 529 plans. In most cases, 529 plans are listed under the parent, because usually the student was a minor when those plans were started, okay? And they're probably still a minor now if they're under 18 years of age. So on the FAFSA, you need to list what is in that 529 plan as an asset, but it's listed under the parents. And they count a lesser percentage of the parents' assets towards the overall expected family contribution, okay? So yes.
Is the 529 plan a savings of some sort?
Yes, a 529 plan is a savings that parents use.
Who started when they were younger to put
Sure,
money in. Okay.
sure.
So that-
Yes, yes.
When you talk about the 529, it's not the custodial parent.
Correct. So if the 529 plan, if you're divorced and it's listed under your ex-wife and you're the custodial parent, then you don't need to list that 529 plan. Correct. See, everyone's mind, the wheels are turning now.
The child has saving bonds.
Bonds have to be, yes, that's an asset. Yes, yes. Okay, I'm going to move on, guys. Okay, so the FAFSA results. So you filed the FAFSA, okay? And we have the information now. We're going to start sending you award letters, okay? But before we start sending you award letters, there are going to be certain results that are sent to you. Or when I say you, I mean the students. So remember I mentioned to you that the students are emailed? Once the FAFSA is filed, the results are then going to be listed, or the student aid report is going to be sent to the student. That student aid report has all the information that was on the FAFSA. You need to make sure that that information is accurate. Now, one of the big factors, one of the things that happens all the time is people will accidentally put a higher income. So you made $50,000 last year, and all of a sudden you're making $500,000 because you added a zero by accident. Make sure, or you put that your taxes paid for last year equaled your income. That one usually the FAFSA.gov will catch online. But there are mistakes that can be made when you're filling out the FAFSA. So make sure you check that student aid report. So once you file the FAFSA, make sure, I know a lot of parents will put their email addresses on the FAFSA to make sure they get the student aid report, which is fine. Nobody's going to say anything about it. Just make sure you check that student aid report. Make sure all the information is accurate. The schools you want are listed there, are listed. If you need to make any updates, you can go right back into that FAFSA and make those updates. Okay? But just make sure you check it. Okay, financial aid award letters. Like I said, you file, now it's up to the schools. Usually starting mid-February, sometimes maybe beginning of February. It used to always be March 1st. Financial aid award letters start going out from schools. Like I said, they're mailed out paper. A lot of times, they're mailed out electronically. I will tell you at UB, we tried doing it electronically one year and it was a disaster, so now we do it both by paper and we do it electronically, at least for our incoming students. Because for the first time, it's new for people, so you want to make sure that they're getting it. God bless you. Okay, so on that award letter, it's going to have what you're eligible for. Whether you're eligible for Pell, whether you're eligible for loans, work study, TAP, everything on there is going to be listed that we believe that you're going to be eligible for. Now they're trying to make these financial aid award letters easier to read. I still think some of them are very difficult to read, so that's usually when we come into play. That's usually when you call up the financial aid office and say, what in God's name does this mean? What's the bottom line? Because the bottom line is, how much is it going to cost you to go to school next year? We have all these numbers written, but what's the bottom line? Okay, I don't know what all this means. That's where we're here to help you with, okay? We're here to help you through the whole process, but that's really where we're here to help you with. What is the bottom line? How much is it going to cost next year? How much are you going to have to take out of a loan? How much are you going to have to take out of pocket? You know, we will be able to help you, and that's what our job is, to do that. You want to make sure that you compare your costs. I mentioned earlier that, remember we were talking about the cost of attendances, the budgets? Just because it's a private school, for example, and their costs are higher, it doesn't mean in the long run it's going to be more expensive than a public school or a community college. A lot of times, private schools could provide institutional money that public schools don't have. So a lot of times they could discount that cost of attendance down. So you want to make sure you compare each of the financial aid award letters and see, first of all, take what the cost is, subtract off what all the free money is, scholarships, grants, and then see, do I need to take out loans? Because some schools will put all these loans on there that are from the institution, and it looks like everything's covered, but when it comes out, you're taking out 70% of that cost is out of loans. So you want to be careful with that. Okay, so make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Okay, I mentioned about the TAP program. I'm not going to spend much time on this. You know you have to file it. It is for New York State residents going to New York State schools. Okay? Sir?
Does a New York school count as a public school, or can it be a private school as well?
A New York State school is public-private schools. Yes, yes. Community colleges, correct.
Will that, whether you're eligible or should apply for that, be on your award letter also?
It will be. Just so you know, for TAP, how TAP works with most schools, you'll always see us list TAP on your award letters, but we'll always put an estimated after it. And the reason we do that is because when we do these award letters, we don't know if you filed for TAP. And TAP does their own verification process. Remember I mentioned in the FAFSA, you could use that IRS retrieval? TAP automatically goes into the New York State Department of Taxation and they grab that information. And they don't do that till later in the summer, and we've already sent out award letters. So the TAP that's going to be listed on the award letter is really an estimate until you're officially notified by TAP of what the award is, and they will notify you. Okay? There's other New York State programs that are out there. You know, there's through that hesc.newyork.gov website, there are academic and merit scholarships. Okay, that's for New York State residents, again, going to a New York State school. There's a new program that started this fall that Governor Cuomo started, which was STEM, and those are for students that are going into science, technology, what is it? Math and engineering. Right? Thank you. Blank there. So those are great programs because we see a lot of students going into those programs right now, into the sciences, especially health sciences, things like that. So there are opportunities out there for those students. Students that are going part-time, students that are taking less than 12 credit hours can also apply for aid to part-time study through New York State.
Is the STEM scholarship program available only for New York State schools, or is that available for private schools in New York State?
Once again, private or public, yes. It's available for all.
Will that also be listed as an option on your award package? Or is that
Depends on the school. STEM, we will not put on at UB, we will not list it on there because it's not determined, technically isn't determined until after you finish your first semester at that school. Because your grades determine if you're eligible or not. Because you have to be in a certain program, you have to have certain grades.
So when do you apply for that?
You apply for it right at the beginning, you could be approved for it, but we can't guarantee what the award is going to be.
What is that website again?
New York, it's on here, it's hesc.newyork.gov. .ny, I'm sorry, .gov.
HESK.
HESC.newyork.ny.gov. And it is on there, just so you know.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I know. You're telling me, you're preaching to the choir here. Who else? Did I have another question over here? Okay. Okay. So those are New York State. Another reason why you want to stay in New York State. Maybe your taxes are going to help you pay for this. Someone mentioned, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, New York State Educational Opportunity. I apologize. That's another program, but it's a need program. Those are from students that come from high need families. And once again, you could apply for it right on the same website. Now, when you go to a private school, it's called HEOP. When you go to a public school, it's called EOP. And like I said, they're educational opportunity programs. They provide you with grants, and they also provide you with counseling services to help a student get through school. Another advantage of getting into an educational opportunity program is that it may take you, they may give you 5 years of TAP in order for you to complete your degree. Okay, so you could get an extra year of TAP if you're in one of these programs. So once again, it has to come from people who come from certain income levels, you know, so you could apply for it, they'll ask for data from you, and then they'll determine if you qualify for it. So you have to have educational and economic need, okay, for that program. Okay. Verification process. There was a question here earlier that do I have to turn in my tax returns once I file my FAFSA? Not necessarily. The government sometimes selects you for a process, or the school will select you for a process called verification. Each school handles it differently. The government will automatically pick 30% of our student population to pick for verification, okay? And it's up to us to then gather the documents and verify the data that's on their FAFSA. Sometimes it's just a random pick. Other times they just see like, oh, they really made some mistakes. Let's make sure that their information is right. You know, now that everything's computerized, they can analyze this data. Other schools will do 100% verification, where they'll say, listen, if you want to receive federal aid, you have to, we're going to require that information. Now, if you're applying for 5 or 6 schools, and Canisius requires that you turn in verification documents, they'll notify the student, you have to turn these in, turn them in by this date. You also apply to UB, and we're not asking for it, don't give it to us, okay? Only give it to them if they're asking for it, okay? Once again, this is where the lines of communication need to be open, because if they're asking for that information from the student, which they will only ask it of the student, it's up to the student to provide that information. And in most cases, they'll just ask for a verification form to be filled out. If you use IRS retrieval, the only thing you really need to turn in are W-2s and sometimes, you know, asset information. And if you didn't use the IRS retrieval, you just have to turn in copies of your signed tax returns from the year before. So it's not a hard process, it really isn't, but you want to have that information available. But only turn it in when we ask for it. Even though your FAFSA may say you were selected for verification, school didn't ask for it, don't give it to us, okay? So remember that. Professional judgment. There are things that change in households. So earlier we said that it was always based on the prior year's information. So next year will be based on 2014. Things happen, okay? Things happen in families. Divorce, death, loss of income due to unemployment, things like that. That's not something you could report on the FAFSA. You need to let us know about that. Another thing, especially at private schools, if you have another sibling that's going to a private high school or a private grammar school, sometimes they take those costs into consideration as for professional judgment, okay? But how do you know what we can use? It's called a special circumstance, okay? How do you know what's a special circumstance? Ask us. If it's something that you think is really going to affect you being able to fund that student's education next year, then ask us. What I may determine as a special circumstance and may use my professional judgment at UB, my friend Kurt Gum over at Canisius may not. It's up to the individual school. So if you are applying to numerous schools, Just because I approve a special circumstance doesn't mean that every school that you listed on the FAFSA is going to approve that. You need to contact each one of those financial aid offices. Sir, did I see a hand?
Yeah, if the parent is attending school part-time as well, that's special circumstance.
No, unfortunately. Yeah, years ago, if a parent was attending school, because they ask on the FAFSA, how many are in your household, how many are attending school? And the parent would be able to be used as in college as long as they were taking at least 6 credit hours. That's not the case anymore. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Now, the parent can list the student on their FAFSA as in college. Their child is in college. But the parent, the student can't use the parent. Okay? Yeah, it doesn't work both ways, unfortunately. So, the question, I think the big thing is, if there is something that is unique, something has changed in your households, especially dealing with income, ask us. And the worst thing we're going to say is no, that doesn't qualify for a special circumstance. Okay? Important reminders. FAFSA is free. Don't pay anybody to fill it out. We do have available help that's available through high school counseling offices, at the financial aid offices. Utilize these resources because there is a lot of help out there. There's financial aid nights, as it was mentioned earlier, SUNY, UB, Buff State, ECC. Starting January and February, we have financial aid nights or financial aid days SUNY financial aid days, where we'll help you fill out the FAFSA. Okay, we'll fill it out right with you as long as you bring that information and you have your PIN number. So just check our websites, buffalo.edu for UB and ECCs and Buff States. You need to file FAFSA every single year. You need to file the state TAP application every year. Check in with the institution. Make sure if their financial aid application needs to be filled out every year. Make sure you complete your FAFSA. I put March 1st here because I'm being selfish about UB, but make sure you check with the schools you're applying to find out what date they want that FAFSA filed and file your FAFSA by the earliest date. So if they want it by February 1st, get it filed by February 1st. Okay, questions and answers, sir.
Student loans, I'm curious if he takes out a student loan, is that a fixed or a variable?
Great question. They're all fixed rates now. So the rates for this year are locked in for the life of the loan. So if a student was a freshman this year and they took out a loan, the rates that were charged this year are locked in for the life of the loan. Now when that student returns next year, there's going to be new rates determined on July 1st for any loan they take out that academic year. Okay? And so on and so on and so on.
What was it for
3.86. So, and I agree. I mean, I still think interest rates are too high, considering what interest rates are like in the world.
So, do they have to reapply for a loan each year then?
Oh yeah, just when you apply for the FAFSA every year, you're going to get a new financial aid award letter every year, which means you're going to have new loan eligibility every year.
And you have to go in independently and apply for those loans, or is it done through the school?
All loans, that's a great question. All loans are done through the schools now. Okay? All federal loans, let me just clarify that. Because the one program I didn't talk about in this presentation were private loans. Some students, you can take out what's called a private loan. So you have federal loans, the subsidized, the unsubsidized, the Perkins loans, the Parent Plus loans. Okay? Those are all federal loans. Well, let's say the parent says, and this happens, I don't want to take a parent loan out. I want it to be the student's responsibility. So they could co-sign what's called a private alternative loan. Those loans are through private lenders. Sallie Mae is probably one of the largest that are out there. Wells Fargo, Discover. Those are all different lenders that are out there. Those usually have variable rates. They do offer fixed, but they do have variable rates on those. And what they do on those loans is they look at credit worthiness. Obviously not credit worthiness of the student, because most students at that age don't have credit. So they're looking at the parent. that loan isn't paid, the parent's the cosigner, the parent is responsible for that loan. So just be aware of that, okay?
You had a scholarship that was awarded every year from the school. Would that affect your financial aid?
It will, okay, if you have a scholarship that's awarded to you, given to you for 4 years, will it affect your financial aid? It'll never affect your need-based aid. Need is need, no matter what. The need is determined by different factors, not that scholarship. Okay? So it will not. Okay, I know back here.
When the student takes out a loan, they need a parent cosign if they're taking out a loan from the school.
If they're taking out a federal loan, they do not need a parent cosigner. And that loan is guaranteed by the government.
And that's at a fixed rate.
And that's at a fixed rate. And those loans follow you till death do you part. So, yes, the government does guarantee you, but you know they will follow you. Okay? So,
Just like the loans, can they apply for grants every year also?
well, once again, when you fill out that FAFSA, just because, that's a great question, because say I qualified for a $5,000 Pell Grant this year. Doesn't mean I'm going to qualify for $5,000 every year that I'm in college. You have to fill out the FAFSA every single year. Now, if your financial data in your household stays similar, then chances are you're gonna, but we can't guarantee that. The only thing we can guarantee is if we're gonna give you a scholarship or not. And that's another thing about scholarships too with colleges. Make sure you know how long that scholarship is good for and what you need to maintain that scholarship. Because that was another little trick these colleges and universities use. They get you in, and then the scholarship seems to whittle down after the first couple of years. Who's going to transfer in their third year in most cases? Okay, so you want to make sure that you have something in writing that scholarship, as long as you meet the qualifications, that it's good for that time period, for the 4 years.
Does UB have an alumni credit, like I know the local colleges do that?
No, they don't. State schools do not have alumni. Private schools do. Yeah, private schools do.
Let's say UB's tuition is $9,000.
Yep.
And my child gets $5,000 in merit, and she gets another $5,000 from the place I work, and she gets another $2,000 from TOPS.
So $12,000.
Can she bank that?
Yeah, what happens is, remember when we put together, we just don't consider tuition costs and fees. Okay, and by the way, you're very close with $9,000. So, I was gonna say you've done this before. So, as far as anything in excess, because we put together a budget, that budget just doesn't include tuition and fees. Even if you're living at home and you're commuting, we still have to put transportation costs, books and supplies, personal expenses. So, any money in excess of that $9,000 that we'll bill you gets refunded to the student each semester. And that's money that they should use for educational purposes. They should use for books and supplies, to travel back and forth if they're living, at home. So, to answer your question, it comes back to them. Let's hope. And that's another thing. You need to check with the students when they're getting refunds, what they're doing with that money, okay? Because all of a sudden, if you notice they're taking spring break trips all the time and you're not helping and they're not working or they're not working a lot, where's that money coming from? These are the things you want to keep your eyes open.
Any financial aid of any form.
I'm sorry?
Any financial aid of any form that our kids get for a specific school.
Yes.
Say Buck State. Is it automatically just paid right to Buck State, or is it us?
In most cases nowadays, all the federal and state programs are paid directly to the school. Loans directly to the school. That wasn't the case years ago. Everything is paid directly to the school. Certain scholarships, sometimes they're paid to the student, but we don't see that many anymore, okay? But if they're paid to the student, a lot of times they'll make them co-payable to the school. So it'll say to the school and Buffalo State. So they have to bring it to the bursar's office. Then the bursar office has to credit their account. If it's in excess, they'll get that money refunded to them. Okay? What other questions?
If a child's 17 years and was offered a gift of money that's not accessible until 21, does that count as an asset?
Yes and no. So you do have to list it, but that's when I would check with as far as special circumstance. You would want to check with the school. But because that money is in the child's name, or the student's name, they do need to list that as an asset. So yes. And then what I would say is, listen, if you could provide proof, is how I would handle it. If you could provide proof that you don't have access to it, I will take it off the FAFSA for that year. And then every year you'd have, and just so you know, just because I do a special circumstance for 1 year doesn't mean it's good every year. You have to do it, you have to ask for it every single year. Did I see a hand back over here? Yeah.
If you were awarded like a full tuition at a specific college,
Yeah.
would you be able to apply to federal financial aid towards moving forward?
Without a doubt. So the question was, if you receive a full scholarship for tuition and fees, can you apply for financial aid for those other expenses like room and board, books and supplies? Yes. Yes, 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 yes.
Any money that I would, the parents would borrow, is that deferred?
No, but you can. Okay, so students, if a parent borrows a Parent Plus loan, they're required to start paying on that loan right away while the student's in school. But they could contact the servicer of that loan and defer that, and there's a certain criteria they have to meet. Okay? Interest will accrue the whole time. Yeah. So the interest will accrue on both, remember, interest accrues on both unsubsidized loans and parent loans. From the time those loans are dispersed to the school to the time you pay those things off. Back here.
The 401k, you don't claim those?
I'm sorry?
The 401k, you don't
So whatever your balance is in your 401k, you do not need to report that. Now, if you're in a 401k program that's sponsored by your employer, for example, if I put $5,000 into my 401k, it's going to be on my W-2 from last year under box 12, whatever, D. I have to report that amount. That's all I have to report, not the value of the 401k, because you really don't have access to that. What if you do? You still don't have to report it. Even if you're at 59.5 or whatever, yeah, you do not. Do not. Do not.
If your husband was in the service, is
Yeah.
there any kind of
There.
funding that you needed to-
Okay, so anybody who is, including students, anybody who is in the armed forces, parents, students, I always recommend they contact, there's a Veterans Affairs office on each and every college campus, and they can help you access the programs that are available. I'm not well versed in all the programs, but yes, there are programs through the state and federal government. Okay, so definitely contact the Veterans Affairs offices, the Veterans Services, and they would be able to guide you through that. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for your time. Have a good holiday.
I'd like to thank Kevin for coming out tonight, being our financial aid guru.